Hello there and welcome. Whether you're settling in for the night or just letting your mind wander somewhere beyond the everyday, I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Is it night time where you're listening? Can you see the darkness outside your window, tamed now by streetlights and the glow of distant cities? Or perhaps it's daytime and the sun feels impossibly far from the world we're about to explore. Either way, you are safe in this moment in ways your ancestors could never imagine. Tonight, we're going to explore something primal, a fear so deep it's still written into your very DNA. Picture this. For millions of years, the night was not a time for rest, but a battlefield. We think of ourselves as the masters of this planet, the apex predators at the top of the chain. And yet, for the vast majority of our history, we were the hunted, walking through the tall grass with the same sensory equipment you have right now, the same adrenaline, the same heightened hearing, the same instinctual dread of the shadows. Our ancestors faced a world where every snap of a twig meant something was watching. Something with better night vision, sharper teeth, and a hunger that didn't care about our potential. We spent eons in a state of hypervigilance, where the simple act of closing your eyes was the ultimate gamble. Tonight, we're going to understand how the terrors of the ancient night shaped the human mind, and why, even now in your modern room, a part of you still listens to the shadows. Imagine for a moment that you have never known electric light. You have never flipped a switch and banished darkness from a room. You have never walked a lit street or driven a car with headlights cutting through the black. You have never even held a flashlight. Instead, when the sun sinks below the horizon, the world transforms. Colours drain away, shapes blur, distance becomes impossible to judge. The familiar landscape of daytime, where you know every tree and rock and path, becomes alien, becomes hostile, becomes a maze where every step might end in disaster. This is the world our ancestors knew. Not our recent ancestors, not the ones who built cities and wrote books, but the ones who came before, the ones who walked upright across the African savannah 2 million years ago, 3 million years ago, even further back. The ones who had not yet discovered fire, who had not yet invented weapons beyond sharpened sticks and rocks, who were, in almost every meaningful way, prey. And the thing about being prey is that you do not get to choose when danger arrives. Predators do. They choose the time, the place, the moment when you are most vulnerable. And for the vast majority of predators, that moment is night. We carry this knowledge in our bodies still. You might have felt it yourself, a prickle on the back of your neck when you walk through a dark parking lot. Alone, a quickening pulse when you hear an unexpected sound after the lights go out, the urge to check under the bed or behind the shower curtain, even though you know, rationally, that nothing is there. These are not irrational fears, they are echoes, messages written into your DNA by ancestors who were right to be afraid, because the things hiding in the dark were real and they were hungry. The fear of darkness is not universal because we are weak. It is universal because it kept us alive. Every person who stands on the earth today is descended from someone who survived the night. Someone who heard the rustle in the grass and froze. Someone who saw the gleam of eyes in the blackness and ran. Someone who found shelter before the hunters found them. Those who were not afraid. Those who wandered carelessly into the dark. Those who ignored the warnings their bodies whispered. They did not pass on their genes. They became food. And so the fear persisted. It hardened into instinct, carved itself into the architecture of the human brain. You do not have to teach a child to fear the dark. They know it already. It is written in them, passed down through thousands of generations, a gift from ancestors you will never know, but who shaped you in ways you cannot escape. Even now, in a world where true predators are rare, where most of us will live our entire lives without encountering anything that wants to eat us, the fear remains. It is not logical. It is older than logic. It is the voice of survival whispering across the ages, reminding us that darkness was never empty, that night was never safe, and that the shadows have always, always held teeth. Now let us step deeper into the past. Let us walk back through time, past cities and farms, past the first villages and the first fires, back to when the world was wild and the night belonged to creatures who could see in the dark far better than any human ever could. In the Africa of 2 or 3 million years ago, the night was ruled by predators we can barely imagine today. Not because they were mythical or exaggerated, but because they were real, and they were magnificent, and they were absolutely terrifying. The landscape itself was different then. The savannas stretched endlessly, dotted with acacia trees and watering holes that drew animals from across the plains. During the day, herds of antelope grazed, elephants moved in slow processions, and early humans scavenged or gathered what they could. But when the sun began its descent toward the horizon, everything changed. The herbivores grew nervous, clustering together, their ears twitching at every sound. The birds fell silent, and from the tall grass, from the rocky outcrops, from the shadows beneath the trees, the hunters emerged. There were the saber-toothed cats, creatures that seemed too strange to be real, but whose bones we have held in our hands, whose fossils tell us exactly how they lived and how they killed. Smilodon fatalis, one of the most famous, was not as large as a modern lion, but it was far more powerfully built. Its shoulders were thick with muscle, its forelimbs designed to grapple and hold prey, and its canine teeth, those famous sabers, could reach lengths of nearly 30 centimeters. Imagine teeth longer than your hand, curved like daggers, designed not to crush bone but to slice through flesh and sever the great blood vessels in the neck. The mechanics of their killing method have been studied extensively. Unlike modern big cats, which typically kill by suffocating their prey with a bite to the throat, saber-toothed cats used a different technique. They would wrestle their victim to the ground using their immense upper body strength, pin it in place, and then deliver a precise slicing bite to the neck or underbelly. The long canines would slide between vertebrae or into the soft tissue of the throat, cutting through arteries and windpipe in a single motion. Death would come quickly, but not instantly. There would be seconds of awareness, seconds of knowing, before the blood loss became too great and consciousness faded. These cats were ambush predators. They did not chase their prey across open ground. They waited patient and silent, hidden in tall grass or behind rocks, and when the moment came, they struck. Their powerful limbs would bring down even the largest animals, mammoths and ground sloths and bison, holding them still while those terrible teeth did their work, and humans, small and slow and soft-skinned, would have been easy prey, easier than the thick-hided megafauna these cats were designed to hunt. A human would not have required the same level of effort, the same expenditure of energy. A human could be taken quickly, efficiently, with minimal risk to the predator. There is evidence of this. Fossils of early human ancestors, Australopithecus and early Homo species, bear the unmistakable marks of predation. Tooth punctures in skulls that match the spacing of saber-toothed cat canines, gnaw marks on bones, fractures consistent with being dragged and dismembered. At one site, a skull was found with two perfectly spaced punctures in the parietal bones, the bones that form the top and sides of the skull. The spacing matched the canines of a large saber-toothed cat. The individual had been bitten from above, perhaps while sleeping or while trying to hide. The cat had clamped down, the teeth piercing through bone and into the brain cavity. There was no way to survive such an attack. These are not stories or myths. They are facts written in bone, telling us that our ancestors knew what it was to be hunted. They knew the terror of being watched, of being stalked, of being selected as prey. They knew what it felt like to be in the presence of something that could kill them with ease, something that moved silently and struck without warning. But the saber-toothed cats were not the only hunters. There were leopards, sleek and deadly, and unlike their modern descendants, some of the prehistoric leopards were even larger, even more capable. Leopards are nocturnal hunters. They see in the dark with eyes that gather light far more efficiently than ours ever could. They move in silence, padding across the ground without sound, capable of climbing trees with quills in their jaws. For an early human sleeping in a tree for safety, a leopard in the branches was death itself. The leopard's hunting strategy is different from that of the large cats. Where a lion might rely on power and a saber-toothed cat on ambush strength, the leopard is an opportunist, a ghost, a shadow that slips through the darkness with perfect control. They can stalk for hours, moving so slowly that their prey never knows they are being watched. They can freeze mid-step, becoming utterly still, blending into the dappled light and shadow until they are invisible, and when they strike, they do so with explosive speed, covering the final distance in a blur of motion, before clamping powerful jaws onto the throat of their victim. Modern leopards have been observed hunting primates including baboons and smaller monkeys. They learn the patterns of their prey, know where they sleep when they are most vulnerable. There is no reason to think ancient leopards behaved any differently when it came to early humans. In fact, the evidence suggests they actively hunted us. Fossil evidence shows that leopards preyed on early humans with regularity. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, researchers have found the bones of Homo habilis with bite marks that could only have come from a leopard. The patterns of damage, the way the bones were gnawed, the precision of the bites, all point to predation, not scavenging. These early humans were not killed and left to rot. They were eaten. They were meals. The bones were found in concentrations that suggest they had been dragged to a feeding site, perhaps the base of a tree where the leopard could eat undisturbed, safe from other scavengers. Some of the bones showed repeated tooth marks, suggesting the leopard had returned to feed multiple times. This was not a single event, but a pattern, a behaviour, a hunting strategy that worked. For our ancestors, the leopard represented a particular kind of terror. It could attack from above, from below, from any direction. It could see you when you could not see it. It could move without sound, approach without warning, and once it decided you were prey, there was very little you could do to escape. Your only hope was to avoid being selected in the first place, to stay in groups, to remain vigilant, to never let your guard down. Then there were the hyenas, creatures we might think of as scavengers today, but who were, in the deep past, formidable predators in their own right. Spotted hyenas have jaws powerful enough to crush bone, to crack open skulls and long bones to get at the marrow inside. The bite force of a hyena is among the strongest of any mammal, capable of exerting pressures that would shatter the bones of almost any prey animal. They are not scavengers by preference. They are hunters, efficient and ruthless, and they hunt in packs, coordinating their attacks, wearing down prey with relentless pursuit. A single hyena is dangerous. A pack of hyenas is nearly unstoppable. They work together, spreading out to surround their prey, taking turns harrying and biting until the animal is too exhausted to run, too injured to fight back. Then they move in, and the feeding begins. Hyenas do not wait for their prey to die before they start eating. They are pragmatic, opportunistic. If the animal is down and unable to escape, it is food. The fact that it is still breathing is irrelevant. There is evidence from caves in Morocco, in South Africa, in Spain, that hyenas brought human remains back to their dens. Bones of our ancestors, chewed and splintered, mixed in with the bones of antelope and zebra and other prey. In some cases, the bones show signs of having been cracked open while the person was still alive, which suggests they were not scavenged corpses but living victims, dragged back to the den and consumed. At one site in Morocco, dating back over 500,000 years, researchers found a human femur with distinctive hyena tooth marks. The bone had been gnawed at both ends, where the softest tissue and richest marrow are located. The damage was consistent with the feeding patterns of spotted hyenas, who often return to bones over several days, cracking them systematically to extract every last bit of nutrition. The individual this bone belonged to had been killed and eaten. Whether the hyenas killed them or found them already dead is unclear, but the end result was the same. They became food, became fuel, became nothing more than calories to be consumed and forgotten. And then there were the cave lions, Panthera leospelea, among the largest cats to ever walk the earth. They were bigger than modern African. Lions, some individuals reaching weights of over 300 kilograms, with bodies built for power and endurance. Unlike modern lions, which prefer the warmth of the savannah, cave lions lived in the colder regions of Europe and Asia, and they were well adapted to hunting in low light. Their fur was likely thicker, their bodies more robust, capable of surviving in environments where temperatures dropped well below freezing. Their territories overlapped with early human settlements, creating unavoidable conflict. Archaeological sites across Europe contain human remains, with distinctive bite patterns matching cave lion dental profiles. At one site in Germany, wooden spears were found alongside cave lion bones, suggesting that early humans both hunted and were hunted by these apex predators. The relationship was not one-sided. Humans were not always the victims, but in the dark, when vision failed and reflexes slowed, the advantage shifted decisively to the predators. The cave lions' night vision was far superior to any humans. Their eyes, like those of all cats, contained a high density of rod cells, specialized for detecting motion and shapes in low light. The tapetum lucidum, that reflective layer behind the retina, allowed them to make use of even the faintest traces of starlight or moonlight. Where a human would see only blackness, a cave lion would see a world rendered in shades of grey, clear enough to navigate, to hunt, to kill. They could see the shape of a human crouched behind a rock. They could detect the slight movement of someone trying to creep away. They could judge distance and trajectory with precision, even in conditions that would leave a human effectively blind. This was their world. The night belonged to them, and in that darkness humans were little more than prey animals, trying desperately to survive until dawn. The fossil record tells us that these encounters were not rare. At multiple sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia, human bones have been found bearing the marks of large predator teeth. Some show the crushing damage of hyena jaws, others show the puncture wounds of saber-toothed cats. Still others bear the telltale grooves of leopard or cave lion fangs. In many cases, the bones were found in clusters, suggesting that the predators had repeatedly used the same locations to consume their kills. These were not random attacks. They were systematic hunting, a strategy that worked, a source of food that the predators returned to again and again. And so our ancestors learned. They learned to fear the dark not because they were cowards, but because the dark was genuinely dangerous. They learned to listen for the crack of a twig, the low growl in the distance, the sudden silence that meant a predator had entered the area and all the other animals had frozen in fear. They learned to recognize the signs, the paw prints in the dust, the scratch marks on trees, the smell of a carnivore that had passed through recently. They learned which places were safe and which were death traps. They learned that night was the time to hide, to huddle together, to stay still and quiet and hope that the hunters passed by. This was not paranoia. It was survival. Every instinct they developed, every behavior pattern they adopted was tested against reality. The ones who survived were the ones whose instincts were correct, whose fears were justified, whose caution kept them alive long enough to pass on their genes. And those genes, those instincts, those ancient fears, they are still with us. They still shape the way we respond to darkness, to unexpected sounds, to the feeling of being watched. The predators may be gone, but the memory of them is written into our biology, carried forward through thousands of generations, a testament to the nights our ancestors endured and the dangers they faced. To understand why the night was so dangerous, we have to understand what our ancestors lacked. They were not slow thinkers. They were not stupid. But their bodies, the tools they were born with, were woefully inadequate for the world they lived in. Humans are diurnal creatures. Our eyes are designed for daylight. The back of the human eye contains cells called cones, which allow us to see colour and fine detail in bright light. We have relatively few rods, the cells that detect light and movement in dim conditions. This is why, when you step from a bright room into a dark one, you cannot see anything at first. Your eyes need time to adjust, and even when they do, your vision in the dark is poor compared to that of nocturnal predators. A cat, for example, has eyes with a reflective layer called the tapetum lucidum, which bounces light back through the retina, effectively giving the eye a second chance to capture photons. This is why cats' eyes seem to glow in the dark when a flashlight hits them. It is that reflected light shining back out. Humans do not have this. We cannot gather light the way nocturnal. Animals can. In low light, a lion can see 6 times better than a human, a leopard even better. An owl can see in conditions that would leave us effectively blind. Our ancestors knew this disadvantage intimately. They knew that when the sun set, they lost their greatest sense, the one they relied on for navigation, for recognizing danger, for coordinating with others. In the dark, they were fumbling, guessing, vulnerable. But the problem was not only vision, it was also speed and strength. Early humans were not fast runners. Australopithecus afarensis, one of our distant ancestors, was small, perhaps a little over a metre tall, and while they could walk upright, they were not built for sprinting. Later species like Homo habilis and Homo erectus were taller and more capable, but still nowhere near as fast as the predators that hunted them. A lion can run at speeds of up to 80 kilometers per hour in short bursts. A leopard can reach 70. A hyena can maintain a pace of 60 kilometers per hour over long distances, Humans, even modern humans in peak physical condition, can barely reach 45, and that only for a brief sprint. Our ancestors, without modern nutrition or training, would have been slower still. In a direct chase, a human loses, every time. But perhaps the greatest vulnerability was sleep. Every animal must sleep. It is not optional. Sleep is when the body repairs itself, when the brain processes information, when energy is restored. But sleep is also when you are defenseless, when your eyes are closed, when your muscles relax, when your awareness of the world fades. For a prey animal, sleep is dangerous. For a human, sleeping at night when predators are most active was a terrifying gamble. You could not stay awake forever. Eventually exhaustion would take you, and you would slip into unconsciousness whether you wanted to or not. And in those hours, you were at the mercy of whatever prowled in the darkness. This is why early humans developed strategies to mitigate the danger. They slept in groups, with individuals taking turns keeping watch. They sought out defensible locations, caves with narrow entrances, rock overhangs, places where predators could not easily reach them. They climbed trees, though even this was not foolproof, as leopards are excellent climbers. But without fire, these strategies were only partially effective. A cave was safer than open ground, but it did not guarantee survival. Predators knew where humans sheltered. They could wait outside. They could listen for sounds of movement. They could smell the warm bodies inside and know that food was near. In some cases, they could even enter. Fossil evidence from South African caves shows that leopards and hyenas used these same caves as dens, sometimes at the same time that early humans were seeking refuge there. The result was inevitable. Humans became prey. And the night, when all these vulnerabilities were magnified, became the most dangerous time of all. Now imagine a world where fire does not exist, not because it is forbidden or forgotten, but because no one has yet discovered how to make it. This was the reality for our ancestors for millions of years. Fire existed, of course. It appeared in the form of lightning strikes that ignited dry grass, or volcanic eruptions that sent rivers of molten rock across the landscape. But these fires were temporary, uncontrollable, and terrifying. They were not tools. They were forces of nature to be avoided or fled from, not harnessed. Without fire, the night was absolute. When the sun set, there was no way to push back the darkness. No torches, no campfires, no glowing embers to mark the boundary between safety and danger. The world simply went black, and you were left to navigate it with senses that were never designed for that task. In this fireless world, the strategies for surviving the night were limited and desperate. The most common was to find shelter and hide. Caves were ideal, but they were not always available, and when they were often already occupied by predators. A cave that offered protection from the weather was just as appealing to a lion or a bear as it was to a human. The evidence for this competition is written in stone. At sites like Swartkrans in South Africa, researchers have found layers of sediment containing both human bones and the bones of predators, all jumbled together. This suggests that the cave was used by both, either at different times or, in some cases, simultaneously, with deadly results. When caves were not an option, early humans would seek out dense thickets of vegetation, places where the undergrowth was so thick that large predators could not easily move through it. Or they would climb trees, settling into the branches for the night, and hoping that their grip would not fail while they slept. But these were imperfect solutions. Trees offered no protection from the cold, and a fall from a branch could be just as deadly as a predator. Thickets could trap you as easily as they could protect you. And always, there was the vulnerability of sleep. Even in the safest location, you had to close your eyes eventually. Another strategy was to stay awake. Groups of early humans would take shifts, with some sleeping while others kept watch, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement, listening for the sounds that meant danger was near. This required trust, cooperation, and a level of social organization that was still developing in early human groups. It also required the ability to function on very little sleep, a trait that humans have retained to this day. We are capable of surviving on fragmented sleep in ways that many other animals are not. It is a skill born of necessity, honed over millions of years of dangerous nights. But even with all these strategies, the night remained terrifying. Without fire, There was no way to see what was out there, no way to know if the shadows held a predator or just empty darkness. Every sound, the snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an animal, could be a warning or it could be nothing. You could not afford to ignore it, but you also could not spend the entire night in a state of panic. You had to find a balance between vigilance and rest, between awareness and the exhaustion that came from constant fear. And so the fear became part of you. It seeped into your bones, into your instincts, into the very structure of your mind. You learned to be afraid of the dark because being afraid kept you alive. You learned to listen for danger, to freeze when you heard it, to hide when you could and flee when you had to. You learned that night was not a time for exploration or adventure. It was a time for survival, nothing more. This was the world before fire, a world where the night was an enemy, where darkness was a predator in its own right, and where the simple act of living until dawn was an achievement worth celebrating. It was a world that shaped us in ways we still carry, in the racing of our hearts when we hear a strange noise in the dark, in the unease we feel when we cannot see what is around us, in the deep, primal relief we feel when we turn on a light and the shadows retreat. Then, slowly, something changed. It did not happen all at once. It was not a single moment of brilliance. But over time, over thousands and thousands of years, some early humans began to do something no other animal had ever done. They began to control fire. The first evidence of fire use by early humans is difficult to pinpoint exactly. There are hints, traces, clues scattered across the fossil record. Burned bones from sites in Kenya that may date back 1.6 million years. Charred earth at locations in Israel and Spain. But these early examples are ambiguous. It is hard to tell whether the fire was made by humans or simply taken from a natural blaze and tended. The distinction matters. Taking fire from a lightning strike and keeping it alive is impressive, a sign of understanding and planning. But making fire from nothing, creating that spark through friction or percussion, that is something else entirely. That is mastery. What we do know is that by around 400,000 years ago, the evidence becomes stronger, more consistent. Sites in Europe show clear signs of deliberate fire-making, including fire-cracked stones used as tools and layers of ash that suggest fires were maintained over long periods. The ash was not from a single event, but from repeated fires, built in the same locations night after night, tended and fed and protected. By 125,000 years ago, fire use was nearly universal among anatomically modern humans. It had become not just a tool, but a necessity, as fundamental to survival as water or shelter. Imagine what that first controlled fire must have meant. Imagine being the person who figured out how to keep a flame alive, how to feed it with wood and dry grass, how to shelter it from the wind and rain. Imagine the moment when you realized that this flickering light, this warm glow, could do more than just provide heat. It could push back the darkness. For the first time in the history of the life on Earth, a creature had found a way to extend the day, to create light where there had been none, to transform the night from an enemy into something that could be endured, even mastered. Think about what that meant on a practical level. Before fire, the day ended when the sun set. There was no twilight productivity, no evening activities. When the light faded, you stopped what you were doing and focused solely on survival, on finding shelter, on staying safe until morning. Your world shrank to the small space you could defend, and the hours stretched endlessly as you waited for dawn. But with fire, that changed. The circle of light around a campfire became a bubble of safety, a zone where you could see and be seen, where you could work and talk and eat. The perimeter of that light became a boundary, a wall that predators respected. Beyond it, the darkness still held dangers, but within it, you were protected. For the first time, humans could choose when their day ended. They could extend their activities into the evening, making tools, preparing food, tending to children. The fire gave them time, that most precious of resources, and with that time came possibilities that had never existed before. The impact on survival was immediate and profound. Fire provided warmth, which allowed humans to survive in colder climates, to migrate north into Europe and Asia, where the winters were harsh and the nights long. It allowed them to cook food, which made meat easier to digest, killed parasites, and unlocked more calories from plants. Raw meat is tough, hard to chew, and carries the risk of disease. Cooked meat is soft, flavorful, and safe. The difference is not trivial. It is the difference between barely surviving and thriving, between existing and flourishing. But perhaps most importantly, fire provided protection. Predators fear fire. The sight of flames, the smell of smoke, the heat, all of these things trigger an instinctive retreat in most animals. Lions will not approach a campfire. Hyenas will circle at a distance but will not come close. Even the boldest predators, the ones willing to attack humans in daylight, become cautious in the presence of fire. This was not just a theory. This was tested every night by the people who kept fires burning. Archaeological evidence shows that once humans began to use fire regularly, the rate of predation dropped. Fewer bones show signs of carnivore damage. Fewer remains are found in predator dens. The correlation is clear. Fire changed the equation. It gave humans a tool that could hold the night at bay. And so, for the first time, the darkness became less terrifying. It did not disappear. The fear did not vanish, but it became manageable. A fire could be lit, a perimeter established, and within that circle of light humans could gather, eat, talk, sleep. The night outside was still full of dangers, still full of eyes watching from the shadows. But the fire created a boundary, a wall of light that said, "You cannot cross this line," and most of the time, the predators listened. Fire also changed the social structure of the early human groups. Before fire, the night was a time of silence and stillness. You did not talk because talking drew attention. You did not move because movement made noise. But with fire, the night became a time for gathering. People could sit around the flames, their faces lit by the flickering glow, and share food, tell stories, plan for the next day. Language, which was still developing, may have been accelerated by these fireside gatherings. The ability to communicate complex ideas, to pass on knowledge, to teach the young how to survive, all of this may have been fostered by the safety and light that fire provided. Fire allowed human activity to extend into the darker hours. Tools could be made, hides could be worked, preparations could be done. The day no longer ended when the sun set. It continued, stretching into the evening, giving humans more time to be productive, more time to think and create and plan. This was revolutionary. And slowly, over generations, the balance of power began to shift. Humans were no longer just prey. They were becoming something new, something that could fight back, that could defend itself, that could carve out a place in the world even in the face of creatures far stronger and faster. Fire was the turning point. It was the tool that changed everything. And while the fear of the dark remained, while the instinct to be wary of shadows and sounds persisted, it was no longer the overwhelming terror it had once been. The night was still dangerous, but it was no longer invincible. And yet even now, even in a world lit by electricity and screens and streetlights, the fear remains. You feel it when the power goes out and the darkness rushes in. You feel it when you walk through an unlit parking lot at night, when you hear a sound you cannot identify, when you wake in the middle of the night and the room is too dark to see. Children feel it most acutely. They are terrified of the dark in ways that adults sometimes forget. They see monsters in the shadows, hear threats in the silence, feel danger in every corner of their room. We tell them there is nothing to be afraid of, that the monsters are not real. But in a deeper sense, they are right to be afraid. The monsters were real. They just lived a very long time ago. The fear of the dark is not irrational. It is a legacy, a memory passed down through countless generations. It is the voice of every ancestor who survived the night whispering to you, "Be careful, be vigilant, do not let your guard down." And while the world has changed, while the predators are mostly gone, the voice remains. It is wired into the structure of your brain, into the way your nervous system responds to darkness. When you enter a dark room, your pupils dilate, your heart rate increases slightly, your senses sharpen. This is not imagination. This is biology. Your body is preparing for danger even if your mind knows there is none. Studies have shown that humans are more anxious at night, more prone to feeling watched, more likely to experience fear in the absence of light. This is not a coincidence. It is evolution. The people who felt this fear, who responded to it, who took precautions, were the ones who survived. The ones who did not feel it, who wandered carelessly into the dark, who ignored the signals their bodies sent, they did not make it. And so the fear persisted, generation after generation, until it became as much a part of being human as walking upright or using language. Even our stories, our myths, our nightmares reflect this ancient terror. Monsters and demons are almost always associated with darkness. They come out at night, they hide in shadows, they disappear when the lights come on. This is not random. This is our collective memory, our species' way of processing the very real dangers that lurked in the dark for millions of years. The vampire, the werewolf, the ghost, the creature under the bed, all of these are modern echoes of the predators that once hunted us. They are the saber-toothed cat, the leopard, the hyena, transformed by time and imagination but still carrying the same essential threat. They are the darkness made flesh, and we fear them because we once had very good reasons to. But there is something else worth noticing. The fear is not paralyzing for most people. It is manageable. It is background noise. We have learned to live with it, to function despite it. We turn on lights, we check locks, we tell ourselves that we are safe, and most of the time, we are. The predators are gone. The world has been tamed, but the fear lingers because fear is one of the most powerful survival tools we have. It keeps us cautious. It makes us think twice before taking unnecessary risks. It reminds us that the world, for all its comforts, still holds dangers we cannot always see. In a way, the fear of the dark is a gift from our ancestors. It is their way of reaching across the millennia and saying, "We survived so that you could exist, and part of what kept us alive was this fear. Do not ignore it. Do not dismiss it. Honor it, understand it, and use it to keep yourself safe." The night is no longer filled with predators, but the night is still the night. And somewhere, deep in the oldest parts of your brain, you still remember when it was not safe to close your eyes. But there is more to this story than just fear and survival. There is also adaptation, innovation, and the slow transformation of our species from hunted to hunter. The relationship between humans and the night did not remain static. It evolved, shifted, changed with each generation as we learned new strategies and developed new tools. And understanding this transformation helps us see not just where we came from, but how we became who we are today. The invention of weapons changed everything, though not in the way you might think. The first weapons were not sophisticated. They were branches picked up from the ground, rocks that fit comfortably in the hand, bones from scavenged carcasses that could be wielded as clubs. Simple things. But even simple weapons gave early humans something they had never had before: the ability to strike from a distance, to inflict harm without getting close enough to be harmed in return. A thrown rock might not kill a leopard, but it could startle one, make it think twice about attacking. A stick used to poke and jab could keep a hyena at bay long enough for you to reach safety. These were not game changers on their own. They did not suddenly make humans the apex predators of the savannah, but they shifted the calculation slightly. They made humans a little more dangerous, a little less appealing as prey, and over time those slight advantages accumulated. The development of stone tools was gradual, spanning hundreds of thousands of years. The oldest stone tools we have found date back nearly 3.5 million years, simple flakes of rock chipped away to create a sharp edge. These were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were primarily used for butchering, for cutting meat away from bones, for processing plant materials. But the skill required to make them, the understanding of how stone fractures, the patience to shape it, these were the foundations of something larger. As generations passed, the tools became more refined. The hand axe appeared, a teardrop-shaped stone tool that fit perfectly in the palm, with edges sharp enough to slice through hide and muscle. These were versatile tools, used for everything from digging to defense, and crucially, they were standardized. Across vast distances, across different groups of early humans, hand axes looked remarkably similar. This suggests that knowledge was being passed down, that there were teaching moments around fires or in the shade of acacia trees, where older members of the group showed younger ones how to strike the stone just right, how to create the edge they needed. This was culture. This was the beginning of accumulated knowledge, of one generation building on the innovations of the last. And with each innovation, humans became slightly better equipped to face the night. The development of the spear was perhaps the most significant advancement in terms of defense against nocturnal predators. A spear is a simple tool, just a stick with a sharpened or fire-hardened point, but it fundamentally changes the dynamic between human and predator. With a spear, you have reach. You can strike from a distance of 2 meters or more, keeping the teeth and claws of a predator away from your vulnerable body. You can brace the spear against the ground and let a charging animal impale itself on the point. You can thrust and retreat, wearing down an attacker without ever coming within range of its weapons. Evidence of spear use goes back at least 500,000 years, and possibly much further. At a site in Germany called Schöningen, researchers found wooden spears dating to around 400,000 years ago, preserved in an ancient lake bed. These were not crude sticks. They were carefully crafted, balanced, shaped to be thrown like javelins. The wood had been selected for its strength and flexibility. The points had been fire-hardened to make them more durable. These were the work of skilled craftspeople, people who understood their materials and knew exactly what they needed to survive. And with spears, the balance began to shift. Humans were still vulnerable at night. They still lacked the night vision, the speed, the natural weapons of the predators that hunted them. But now they had a tool that could level the playing field. A group of humans armed with spears standing back to back around a fire was no longer easy prey. It was dangerous. It was something that might cost a predator its life. And predators, for all their power, are fundamentally risk-averse. They cannot afford serious injuries. A lion with a broken leg will starve. A leopard with a punctured lung will die. So when faced with prey that might fight back effectively, predators often choose to move on, to find something easier, something safer. The role of cooperation in nighttime survival cannot be overstated. Humans are social animals, more so than almost any other primate. We form bonds, create hierarchies, work together in ways that go far beyond simple pack behavior. And nowhere was this more important than in facing the dangers of the night. A lone human at night was almost certainly doomed. Without fire, without weapons, with nothing but their own limited senses, they stood little chance against the predators that ruled the darkness. But a group of humans, working together, watching out for one another, taking shifts to keep guard while others slept, had a fighting chance. The structure of early human groups evolved in response to these nighttime dangers. We know from archaeological evidence that even very early hominins lived in groups. We find their remains clustered together, their tools concentrated in specific areas, signs that they gathered, worked, and likely slept in close proximity to one another. This was not just about companionship, it was about survival. The mathematics of group defense are straightforward. If you have 10 people in a group and each person needs 8 hours of sleep out of every 24, then at any given time, you can have multiple people awake and alert while the others rest. You can position your group in a defensible location, a cave entrance or a rocky outcropping, and have watchers, facing in different directions, covering all approaches. If a predator tries to approach, someone will see it or hear it, and the alarm can be raised. The group can respond as a unit, shouting, throwing rocks, brandishing weapons, presenting a unified front that is far more intimidating than any individual could be. This kind of cooperation requires communication, and this is where language likely played a crucial role. Simple vocalizations, warning calls, signals that meant danger is approaching from the left or stay quiet, something is nearby, these would have been invaluable. The ability to coordinate a defense, to assign roles, to plan ahead, all of this becomes exponentially easier with language. And there is an interesting feedback loop here. The need to defend against nocturnal predators may have accelerated the development of language. The ability to communicate complex ideas, to share information about what works and what does not, to pass on knowledge about predator behavior and defensive strategies, all of this would have provided a significant survival advantage. Groups that could communicate effectively would have been more successful, would have lost fewer members to predation, would have passed on their genes at higher rates. And so, language evolved, shaped in part by the long dark nights when clear communication could mean the difference between life and death. Trust was essential. You had to trust that the person keeping watch would not fall asleep, would not wander off, would sound the alarm if danger approached. You had to trust that if you were attacked, the others would come to your aid, would not flee and leave you to your fate. This level of trust requires strong social bonds, relationships built over time through shared experiences and mutual dependence. It requires empathy, the ability to understand and care about what happens to others, and it requires a sense of fairness, a recognition that if someone watches over you tonight, you owe them the same protection tomorrow. These are the foundations of human morality, of ethics, of the complex social structures that define our species, and they may have been forged, at least in part, in the fires of those ancient nights, when survival depended on trusting others with your life. The moon became humanity's first ally against the darkness, though it was an unreliable one. On clear nights when the moon was full or nearly so, the world did not go completely black when the sun set. There was enough light to see by, enough to make out shapes and movement, enough to navigate familiar territory without stumbling into danger. Our ancestors would have learned the cycles of the moon, would have planned their activities around its phases. A full moon meant a night when you could travel if necessary, when gathering or fishing might be possible even after sunset, when the risk of predation was slightly lower because you could see danger coming. A new moon, when the sky was dark and starless clouds obscured even the faint light of distant suns, meant a night to hunker down, to stay close to the fire or shelter, to be extra vigilant. This awareness of lunar cycles is ancient, likely predating modern humans. It is a form of environmental knowledge, an understanding of the natural rhythms that govern the world, and it represents a shift in how our ancestors related to the night. Instead of simply fearing it as an undifferentiated mass of darkness and danger, they began to understand it, to recognize that some nights were more dangerous than others, that the night itself had variations and patterns that could be learned and anticipated. This is the beginning of astronomy, of celestial navigation, of the recognition that the sky holds information that can be used. The stars, too, became familiar. Early humans living far from any sources of artificial light would have seen the night sky in a way that most of us never will, a vast canvas of light with thousands upon. Thousands of stars visible, the Milky Way a bright river across the heavens. They would have noticed that the patterns of stars moved with the seasons, that certain constellations appeared at certain times of year, that the position of stars could tell you which direction you were facing, could help you find your way home if you were lost. And they would have noticed that the stars did not change the amount of light significantly. On a moonless, starlit night, you could see the sky clearly, could pick out individual points of light, but the ground remained dark, the landscape obscure. The stars gave orientation, not illumination. They were guides, not protectors. But knowing where you were, knowing which direction led to safety, that too was a form of defense against the night. If you were caught out after dark, if you had wandered too far while gathering or hunting, and the sun had set before you could return, the stars could lead you home. They could help you avoid getting lost in the darkness, wandering in circles, becoming more and more disoriented until you were easy prey for anything tracking you. The relationship between humans and the night sky is one of the oldest relationships we have with our environment. Long before we understood what stars were, we used them. We navigated by them, marked time by them, told stories about them, and in those stories we can still hear echoes of the fear that shaped them. Many cultures around the world have myths about night demons, creatures that prowl in darkness, beings associated with death and danger. These myths served a purpose. They codified the fear, gave it a shape and a name, and in doing so made it something that could be discussed, taught, passed down. A child who hears stories about the monsters that come out at night is a child who will be cautious after dark, who will not wander off alone, who will stay close to the fire and the safety of the group. The myths are teaching tools, survival information, wrapped in narrative form. As humans spread across the globe, they encountered new environments, new climates, new predators. And in each place, the night presented different challenges. In the frozen north, where early humans migrated tens of thousands of years ago, the darkness was not just about predators, it was about cold. Winter nights in the Arctic or near-Arctic regions could last for months, with temperatures dropping to levels that would kill an unprepared human in hours. Here, fire was not just a defense against predators, it was the difference between freezing to death and surviving until morning. The ability to maintain a fire through a long, dark winter became a matter of life and death. Fuel had to be gathered and stored. Fires had to be tended constantly, fed throughout the night, protected from wind and snow. Letting the fire go out was unthinkable. It meant not just vulnerability to predators, but exposure to cold that would slowly shut down your body, slowing your heartbeat, making you drowsy, leading you into a sleep from which you would never wake. In these environments, the group's survival depended on cooperation in new ways. Someone had to gather wood, someone had to tend the fire, someone had to prepare food and maintain shelter. The division of the labour became more complex, more specialised, and all of it had to function smoothly, because a breakdown in any part of the system could doom the entire group. The night in the north was longer, darker, colder, and more unforgiving than anything early humans had faced in Africa, and yet they survived. They adapted, they innovated, they created clothing from animal skins, sewn with bone needles and sinew thread, multiple layers that trapped warmth against the body. They built shelters from wood and stone and earth, structures that could retain heat from a fire and keep out the bitter wind. They learned to read the weather, to predict when storms were coming, to prepare accordingly. In tropical environments, the challenges were different. The nights were shorter, the temperatures warm, but the density of predators was higher. Jungles and rainforests are full of life, much of it nocturnal. Jaguars in South America, leopards in Africa and Asia, crocodiles near water, venomous snakes that hunted at night, all of these posed threats. And in dense vegetation, sight lines were limited. You could not see danger approaching from a distance. A predator could be mere meters away, hidden behind leaves and vines, and you would never know until it was too late. Here, sound became even more important than sight. Early humans in tropical environments would have learned to recognize the calls of different animals, to distinguish between the normal sounds of the jungle and the warning calls that meant a predator was near. They would have learned which animals went silent when danger approached, which birds stopped singing, which insects stopped chirping. The sudden absence of sound could be just as informative as a loud noise. It could mean that every creature in the area had detected a threat and frozen, waiting to see what would happen. Fire was still important in these environments, but for different reasons. It kept some predators at bay, but it also created smoke, which helped ward off mosquitoes and other biting insects. Anyone who has spent a night in a tropical forest knows that insects can be as much of a torment as any predator, and the diseases they carry, malaria, dengue, yellow fever, can be just as deadly. A smoky fire provided relief, allowed people to sleep without being constantly bitten, reduced the risk of disease. And in every environment, in every climate, the pattern was the same. Humans observed, adapted, learned. They did not overcome the night through physical prowess. They did not develop better eyes or sharper teeth. They overcame it through intelligence, through cooperation, through the slow accumulation of knowledge passed down from one generation to the next. The invention of artificial light beyond fire was a gradual process that took thousands of years. The first oil lamps, simple stone bowls filled with animal fat and a wick made from twisted plant fibres, appeared tens of thousands of years ago. These were revolutionary in their own way. They were portable light, something that could be carried from place to place, that did not depend on having a large fire burning. A lamp could be taken into a cave to explore its depths. It could be used to work by, to extend productive hours into the night. It could be placed near a sleeping area to provide a small circle of light, a psychological comfort if not a real defense. But oil lamps were expensive in terms of resources. They required fat, which was a valuable source of calories, especially in times when food was scarce. Burning fat for light meant not eating it, and that was a trade-off that had to be carefully considered. Lamps were used sparingly for specific tasks, not as a general means of illuminating the night. Candles came much later, and they too required resources, beeswax or tallow, both of which had other uses. The widespread use of candles and lamps did not really begin until humans had domesticated animals and had a surplus of fat and wax available. Before that, fire remained the primary source of light, the campfire and the hearth, gathering places where people could sit together in the glow of flames and feel, for a time, safe from the darkness beyond. The development of better lighting was driven by practical needs. People wanted to work longer, to extend the productive day. Craftspeople wanted to see their work clearly. Scholars wanted to read and write after sunset. But underneath all of these practical motivations was the same ancient drive, the desire to push back the darkness, to create spaces where light prevailed, where the shadows could not hide threats. Even today, we light our homes far more brightly than we strictly need to for practical tasks. We leave porch lights on, install floodlights, illuminate our yards and streets. Some of this is about crime prevention, but much of it is about comfort, about the deep-seated unease that comes from being surrounded by darkness. We're still, in some fundamental way, afraid of the dark. We just have better tools to fight it now. The electric light, when it finally arrived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, changed the human relationship with night more than any invention since fire. Suddenly, darkness was optional. You could flip a switch and banish it completely from any room, any building, any street. Night became, in many ways, just another part of the day. Cities that once went quiet after sunset became 24-hour hubs of activity. Factories could run shifts around the clock. People could read, work, play at any hour. The night lost much of its power, much of its mystery, much of its danger. But something was lost too. The night sky, once a constant presence in human life, disappeared for most people. Light pollution from cities and towns creates a glow that washes out all but the brightest stars. People living in urban areas might see a handful of stars on a clear night, where their ancestors would have seen thousands. The Milky Way, that river of light that guided travellers for millennia, is invisible from most populated areas. We have gained control over darkness, but we have lost our connection to the cosmos, to the vastness of space that surrounds our small planet. And we have lost too some of the awareness that came from living with darkness as a constant presence. We no longer think about the cycles of the moon, about the positions of the stars, about the subtle changes in the quality of twilight that signal the changing seasons. We no longer experience true darkness, the kind of absolute black that our ancestors knew, where no light reaches you at all and your eyes strain to find any hint of illumination. This disconnect from natural darkness has consequences. Our circadian rhythms, the internal clocks that regulate sleep and wakefulness, evolved in a world where darkness meant nighttime and light meant day. But now we can have light at any hour, and many people's circadian rhythms are disrupted as a result. We stay up late staring at screens, flooding our brains with blue light that signals daytime, and then wonder why we have trouble sleeping. We work night shifts, forcing our bodies to be alert when every instinct is telling them to rest. We have mastered the night, but we have not necessarily mastered living in a world without real darkness. The extinction of the megafauna predators that once hunted humans is a complex story, and humans played a significant role in it. As we became better hunters, more organised, more capable of working together to take down large animals, we began to compete directly with predators for resources. We hunted the same prey species, we occupied the same territories, and increasingly, we hunted the predators themselves. The reasons for hunting predators were varied. Sometimes it was defensive, eliminating threats to the group. Sometimes it was for resources, skins and bones that could be used for clothing and tools. Sometimes it was likely about competition, reducing the number of predators that competed for the same prey animals humans wanted. And as human populations grew and spread, the impact accumulated. Saber-toothed cats disappeared around 11,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age. Cave lions vanished around the same time. The giant hyenas, the massive bears, the enormous wolves, all of these apex predators went extinct in a relatively short period of geological time. Climate change played a role, certainly. The end of the Ice Age brought massive environmental shifts, changing habitats, altering prey populations. But humans were part of that equation too. We were a new kind of predator, one that used intelligence and cooperation to overcome physical limitations, one that could organise hunts of unprecedented complexity, one that could adapt to almost any environment. And we were remarkably successful. Too successful, perhaps, for the predators that had once hunted us. There is a certain irony in this. The creatures that our ancestors feared so deeply, that shaped our evolution and our behaviour in profound ways, were ultimately driven to extinction, in part by the descendants of those fearful prey animals. The hunted became the hunters, the victims became the victors. But this transformation did not happen overnight, and it was not complete. Even as recently as a few hundred years ago, there were places where humans still lived in fear of large predators. In parts of Africa and Asia, lions and tigers and leopards still attacked humans with regularity. In India, tales of man-eating tigers and leopards continued into the 20th century. These were not myths but real events, documented by colonial administrators and hunters who were called in to kill problem animals. In some cases, single animals killed dozens or even hundreds of people before they were finally stopped. The Champawat tiger, which terrorized Nepal and northern India in the early 1900s, is credited with over 400 human deaths before it was finally shot. The Tsavo man-eaters, a pair of male lions in Kenya, killed and ate dozens of railway workers in 1898 before they too were killed. These events remind us that the relationship between humans and large predators is not entirely a thing of the past. It is recent history, within living memory for some, and in certain parts of the world it continues today. Crocodiles still attack people who live near rivers and lakes in Africa, Asia and Australia. Sharks occasionally attack swimmers and surfers, though these events are rare and often the result of mistaken identity. Bears, particularly polar bears, and grizzly bears, can be dangerous in areas where their territories overlap with human activity. The difference now is that these are exceptions, isolated incidents that make news precisely because they are unusual. For most of human history, being killed by a predator was a common enough occurrence that it barely warranted mention. Now it is shocking, tragic, newsworthy. We have succeeded, perhaps beyond what our ancestors could have imagined, in making the world safe from the predators that once hunted us. But that success has come at a cost to the predators themselves, many of which are now endangered, their populations reduced to tiny fractions of what they once were, confined to ever-shrinking habitats as human development expands. The psychological impact of millions of years of being prey is still visible in human behavior today, in ways both obvious and subtle. Consider the layout of houses and apartments. We prefer rooms with windows with views of the outside where we can see what is approaching. We feel uncomfortable in windowless spaces, in basements, in interior rooms with no natural light. This makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. A location where you cannot see danger approaching is a dangerous location. Our ancestors needed to be able to scan the horizon, to watch for movement, to see threats before they got too close. The preference for high ground is another example. People are willing to pay premium prices for houses on hills, for apartments on upper floors, for any location that provides an elevated view. Again, this has practical advantages in the modern world: better views, less noise from traffic, but the preference itself likely has deeper roots. High ground meant you could see farther, could spot predators or other dangers from a distance, could have more time to prepare or flee. Sleeping positions reveal interesting patterns too. Most people, when given a choice, prefer to sleep with their back to a wall or corner facing the door. They do not like having their back to an open space or an entrance. This is pure defensive instinct. You want to see danger coming, and you want something solid behind you that cannot be attacked from. People who sleep in the middle of a room, completely exposed on all sides, often report feeling vulnerable, unsafe, even though logically they know they are in no danger. The startle response is another inheritance from our prey days. A sudden loud noise, an unexpected movement, these trigger an immediate involuntary reaction. Your muscles tense, your heart rate spikes, your attention snaps to the source of the disturbance. This happens before conscious thought, before you have time to assess whether the stimulus is actually dangerous. It is pure reflex, the body preparing to respond to a threat. In our ancestors, this response could be life-saving. That rustle in the grass might be a predator. That crack of a branch might mean danger is near. The ones who responded quickly, who froze or fled or prepared to fight, were more likely to survive than those who ignored the signal. And so the startle response became hardwired, automatic, something that happens without our choosing it. The fear of being watched is particularly interesting. Most people at some point in their lives have felt the sensation of being observed, even when they cannot see anyone looking at them. It is an uncomfortable feeling, a sense that there are eyes on you, that you're being tracked or followed. Sometimes this feeling is accurate. Our brains are quite good at picking up subtle cues, peripheral movement, sounds that do not quite fit the background noise, changes in the behavior of other people or animals that might indicate a threat. But often, the feeling is false. a false positive triggered by our hyperactive threat detection system. And this makes sense. In terms of survival, false positives are much less costly than false negatives. If you think you are being watched when you are not, you waste some energy being cautious. If you think you are safe when you're actually being stalked, you die. So evolution favoured the paranoid, the individuals whose threat detection systems were set a bit too sensitive, who felt in danger more often than was strictly warranted. Better to be wrong and survive than right and dead. This is why horror movies and suspense thrillers work so effectively on us. They trigger these ancient fear responses, the fear of being watched, of being stalked, of being hunted in the dark. Our rational minds know that we are safe, sitting in a comfortable chair, watching actors on a screen. But our emotional, instinctive minds respond as if the threat is real, and the fear we feel is genuine if temporary. We seek out these experiences, these controlled doses of fear, perhaps in part because our modern lives are so safe that we rarely experience real danger. The fear response is still there, still part of our psychological makeup, but it has nowhere to go, nothing to focus on. So we create artificial scenarios that let us feel it, let us experience the rush of adrenaline, the quickening of the pulse, the sharpening of awareness, all in an environment where we know ultimately that we are safe. The concept of home, of a safe space, is deeply connected to this history. A home is not just shelter from weather, it is protection from threats. It is a place where you can let your guard down, where you can sleep without fear, where you can feel secure. The importance we place on securing our homes, on locks and alarms and walls, is about more than protecting property. It is about creating a boundary between ourselves and the outside world, a line that separates safety from danger. When that boundary is violated, when someone breaks into a home, the psychological impact goes beyond the loss of belongings. It is a violation of safety, a reminder that the space you thought was secure is not, that danger can reach you even here. Victims of home invasions often report feeling unsafe in their own homes for months or years afterward, sometimes moving to new locations entirely because they cannot recapture that sense of security. This makes sense when you consider it in evolutionary terms. Our ancestors needed secure sleeping locations, places where they could rest without constant vigilance. Finding and maintaining these locations was crucial to survival. A good cave, a defensible rock shelter, these were valuable resources worth protecting. And the loss of such a location, whether to predators or to competing human groups, was a serious setback. The need for secure sleeping spaces is so fundamental that it shows up in how we arrange our bedrooms, how we choose where to place our beds, how we react to sleeping in unfamiliar locations. People often have trouble sleeping in new places, even comfortable hotels or guest rooms, because the space is unfamiliar, and unfamiliar means potentially unsafe. It takes time to feel secure in a new environment, to become comfortable enough to sleep deeply. The rituals we perform before bed, checking locks, closing curtains, setting alarms, these are modern versions of the security checks our ancestors would have performed. Making sure the cave entrance was clear, that the fire was burning, that someone was on watch. We are still, in our way, securing the perimeter before we allow ourselves to become vulnerable in sleep. Children often understand this instinctively. Their requests for nightlights, for doors left open, for parents to check closets and under beds, these are not silly or irrational. They are expressions of a real need for security, for reassurance that the space is safe, that there is nothing lurking in the darkness. As adults, we have learned to override these feelings, to tell ourselves that we are safe even when the room is dark, that the sounds we hear are just the house settling, not something creeping closer. But children have not yet developed that override, and so they express more openly the fear that we all still carry. Honouring those fears, providing the nightlight, checking under the bed, these gestures acknowledge the fear without dismissing it. They say, yes, the dark can feel frightening, and I will help you feel safe. This is perhaps a healthier response than simply telling children that their fears are silly or unfounded. The fears are founded. They are ancient and reasonable. They just happen to be largely unnecessary in the modern world, but that does not make them any less real. The relationship between sleep and darkness in human physiology is complex and deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. Our bodies are governed by circadian rhythms, internal clocks that regulate when we feel alert and when we feel sleepy. These rhythms are synchronized to the cycle of light and dark, to the rotation of the earth that gives us day and night. When it gets dark, our brains begin to produce melatonin, a hormone that makes us feel drowsy and prepares the body for sleep. When light hits our eyes in the morning, melatonin production stops and we begin to wake up. This system worked perfectly for our ancestors. When the sun set and it became too dangerous to do much of anything, their bodies naturally began to prepare for sleep. When the sun rose and it became safe to be active again, they woke naturally, ready to face the day. The circadian rhythm kept them synchronized with the environment, sleeping when they should sleep, waking when they should wake. But in the modern world, this system is constantly disrupted. Artificial light keeps melatonin production suppressed long after sunset. People stay awake until late at night, staring at screens, flooding their eyes with a light that their brains interpret as daytime. Then they try to sleep, but their bodies are confused, not yet ready for rest. In the morning, many people wake to alarms before their bodies are naturally ready, forcing themselves out of bed, while their brains are still producing melatonin, still in sleep mode. The result is chronic sleep deprivation, a population that is perpetually tired, functioning on less sleep than their bodies need, relying on caffeine and other stimulants to maintain alertness. The health consequences are significant. Poor sleep is linked to a range of problems, from weakened immune systems to increased risk of heart disease, from impaired cognitive function to higher rates of depression and anxiety. We have conquered the darkness, but in doing so, we have disrupted systems that evolved over millions of years, and our bodies are paying the price. There is growing recognition that we need to reconsider our relationship with light and dark, that perhaps we should be working with our circadian rhythms rather than against them. This means dimming lights in the evening, reducing screen time before bed, creating sleeping environments that are truly dark, free from the glow of streetlights and electronic devices. It means, in a sense, reconnecting with the natural cycle of day and night that our ancestors knew so intimately. Some people are experimenting with living more in tune with natural light cycles, going to bed when it gets dark, waking with the sun or shortly after. They report sleeping better, feeling more rested, having more energy during the day. This is not surprising. They are aligning their behavior with what their bodies expect, with the patterns that millions of years of evolution have adapted them to. The irony is that we spent so long trying to escape the tyranny of darkness, trying to extend our days, trying to remain active and productive regardless of whether the sun was up or down. And now that we have succeeded, now that we can have light whenever we want it, we are discovering that maybe we need the darkness after all. Maybe our bodies require that period of true dark, that time when the world goes quiet and still, that opportunity to rest deeply and completely. The darkness that our ancestors feared may be, in a different way, something we need for health and well-being. Not the darkness filled with predators and danger, but darkness itself, the absence of light, the natural state of night. And so, we come full circle, back to the question of what the night means to us now, here in the modern world where true darkness is rare and predators are largely absent from human experience. The night is no longer our enemy. It is no longer the time when we are most vulnerable, most at risk. But it is also no longer what it once was, a frontier, a mystery, a vast unknown filled with wonders and terrors. We have mapped it, measured it, illuminated it. We have sent telescopes into space to peer at the darkness between stars, sent probes to explore the dark side of the moon, shone lights into the deepest ocean trenches where no sunlight ever reaches. We have pushed back darkness wherever we find it, driven by that ancient instinct that says, light equals safety, that visibility equals control. But in making the night safe, we have also made it ordinary. There is less mystery now, less magic. The night sky, once a tapestry of stories and navigation markers and divine beings, is now understood as distant suns and planets and galaxies, incredible in their own way, but somehow less personal, less connected to human life. The darkness no longer inspires the same level of fear, but it also does not inspire the same level of wonder. We have gained much, but we have lost something too. Perhaps what we need now is a new relationship with darkness, one that acknowledges both its history and its role in our present and future. We can appreciate that darkness was once dangerous, that the fear our ancestors felt was justified and necessary. We can honour that heritage, understand that the unease we feel in the dark is not weakness, but the echo of survival, a gift from those who came before. And we can also recognize that darkness has value in itself, that it is not just the absence of light, but something with its own qualities, its own importance. In darkness, we can see the stars, can contemplate the vastness of the universe in a way that is impossible in daylight. In darkness, we can rest truly and deeply, can let our circadian rhythms function as they were designed to, can give our bodies and minds the recovery they need. In darkness, there is stillness, quiet, a break from the constant stimulation and noise of the lit world. There is space for reflection, for thoughts that emerge only when the distractions of day are put aside. The challenge is to find a balance, to use light when we need it, for safety and productivity and enjoyment, but to also preserve and protect darkness, to create times and places where it is allowed to exist. Dark sky preserves, areas where light pollution is minimized, are becoming more common, recognized as valuable for both astronomical observation and psychological well-being. People travel to these places specifically to experience real darkness, to see the Milky Way as it appears away from city lights, to feel what the night is like when it is truly dark. And these experiences are often profound. People report feeling small in a good way, humbled by the vastness of the cosmos, connected to something larger than themselves. They report feeling a sense of peace, of being part of natural rhythms that extend far beyond human concerns. These are the same kinds of feelings that indigenous peoples, who have maintained closer connections to natural light cycles, report about the night. It is not something to be feared or conquered, but something to be respected, appreciated, even cherished. Perhaps the ultimate legacy of our ancestors' terror of the night is not that we should fear darkness, but that we should understand it, should recognize both its dangers and its gifts, should learn to live with it rather than against it. The night will never again be what it was to them, a time of mortal danger when survival was uncertain. But it can be something valuable in its own right, a necessary counterpart today, a time of rest and reflection and connection to the natural world. The story of humanity and the night is, in the end, a story about adaptation, about intelligence and cooperation triumphing over physical limitations. Our ancestors faced darkness armed with nothing but their wits and their will to survive, and they found a way through. They discovered fire, invented weapons, formed groups, developed language, created culture. They took the fear that darkness inspired and used it as a tool, let it sharpen their senses and focus their minds, let it drive innovation and cooperation. And generation by generation they pushed back against the dark, claimed more of the night for themselves, made the world safer for their children and their children's children. We are the beneficiaries of that long struggle. We sleep safely in our beds, surrounded by locked doors and lit streets, confident that morning will come and bring no harm. We do not think about the predators that once stalked our kind because they are gone, relegated to distant preserves, or remembered only in stories and museums. The battle our ancestors fought against the night has been won, so completely that most of us never think about the fact that there was a battle at all. But the memory persists, in the quickening of our pulse when we walk a dark street, in the comfort we take from leaving a light on, in the stories we tell our children about things that go bump in the night, in the instinct to check the darkness before we sleep. These are not flaws or failings. They are connections, threads that tie us to our past, to the millions of years of nights that shaped what we are. And perhaps it is worth remembering, worth acknowledging, worth honouring. The fear of the dark is a gift from our ancestors, purchased with their lives, refined by their experiences, passed down through countless generations. It kept them alive long enough to become us. And while we may not need it in the same way they did, while the night is no longer filled with teeth and claws and death, the gift remains. It reminds us where we came from. It connects us to the long chain of humans stretching back into deep time. It whispers to us of the world as it once was, when survival was uncertain and every dawn was a victory worth celebrating. So when you feel that unease in the darkness, when you hear that sound you cannot identify and your heart begins to race, remember, you're not being irrational, you're not being weak, you are being human, fully and completely human, carrying the wisdom of your ancestors in your bones. The darkness may no longer be dangerous, but the memory of when it was remains, and it is a memory worth keeping. Wherever you are right now, whether it is dark or light, whether you are alone or with others, take a moment to appreciate the gift of safety you have been given. The world our ancestors knew was harsh and unforgiving, and the simple fact that you can listen to these words without fear, without scanning the shadows for danger, without keeping one eye on the horizon for approaching threats, that is a privilege earned through millions of years of struggle and innovation and courage. They faced the darkness with nothing but their intelligence and their determination to survive, and they won. Not in a single generation, not in a single lifetime, but slowly, gradually, over countless generations, they made the world safer. They transformed humanity from prey to predator, from victims of the night to masters of it. And because they did, you are here, safe, secure, free to listen, to think, to drift into sleep without fear. That is their legacy. That is what they gave you. And it is worth remembering, worth honouring, worth carrying forward. The night is still the night. The darkness is still the darkness. But you are not the same. Creatures that once huddled in caves and listened in terror for the sound of approaching death. You are their descendants, their inheritors, their triumph. And when you lie down in the darkness tonight, when you close your eyes and let sleep take you, you do so in a world that they made safe. A world where the predators are gone, where the fire is still burning, where the night, for all its ancient history, is just the night. Rest well. You have earned it. They earned it for you. Those millions of ancestors whose names you will never know, but whose fears and hopes and struggles shaped everything you are. And in sleeping safely, in resting without terror, you honour their memory more than words ever could. Thank you for walking this path with me, through the dark and back into the light. Thank you for listening to this story of the night, of fear and survival, of the long journey from prey to safety. May your own nights be peaceful. May your sleep be deep. May you wake refreshed and ready to face whatever the day brings. And may you remember, when the darkness comes, that you carry within you the strength of those who faced far worse and survived. Sleep well. There is one more layer to this story, one more way that the ancient fear of night has shaped modern human life. It appears in the structures we build, in the cities we create, in the very architecture of civilization. Look at any major city at night, and you will see a blaze of light. Skyscrapers lit from within, their windows glowing like geometric stars. Streetlights marching in ordered rows, pushing back the shadows from every corner. Neon signs and digital billboards, flashing advertisements and information into the dark. From space, our cities look like luminous spiderwebs spread across the dark surface of the planet, visible from orbit, marking where humans have gathered. This is not accidental. It is not merely practical. It is, at its core, a continuation of that ancient impulse to push back the darkness, to create zones of safety and visibility. Every light we install, every window we illuminate, every street we brighten, is an echo of that first campfire, that first circle of safety carved out of the dangerous night. We have simply scaled it up, expanded it, turned it into an entire civilization's worth of light. But this triumph comes with costs we are only beginning to understand. Light pollution is now recognized as a significant environmental problem. The constant artificial light disrupts ecosystems, affecting the behavior of nocturnal animals, confusing migrating birds, interfering with the life cycles of insects, and it affects us too. The human body was not designed to be bathed in light 24 hours a day. Our circadian rhythms, our hormonal cycles, our sleep patterns, all of these are being disrupted by our refusal to let the night be dark. There is a growing movement to reclaim darkness, to create dark sky preserves where natural night can be experienced, to reduce unnecessary lighting in cities, to design lights that minimize sky glow. These efforts recognize that darkness itself has value, that the night sky is a resource worth protecting, that there are benefits to allowing some places and times to remain unlit. People who visit dark sky preserves often report profound experiences. They see the Milky Way for the first time, that river of stars that was visible to every human who lived before the electric age, but is now invisible to most of us. They see planets and nebulae and meteor showers. They feel small in the vastness, connected to the cosmos in a way that is impossible under city lights. These experiences are transformative for many, creating a sense of wonder and perspective that stays with them, and they represent a kind of balance, a recognition that we can conquer the night without destroying it, that we can be safe without eliminating every shadow, that there is room in our world for both light and darkness. The psychology of fear itself deserves one final consideration. Fear is often presented as something negative, something to be overcome or eliminated. But this misunderstands what fear is and what it does. Fear is information. It is your body and mind telling you that something requires attention, that there may be danger, that you should be alert and ready to respond. The fear of the dark, specifically, is information passed down through millions of years of evolution, a message from ancestors who learned, often at terrible cost, that darkness requires caution. This does not mean we should live in constant fear, but it does mean we should respect the fear when it arises, should acknowledge it as a legitimate response to uncertainty, should use it as a signal to be aware rather than as something to be suppressed or ignored. Children, as mentioned earlier, are often more in touch with this fear than adults. They have not yet learned to override it, to tell themselves that they are being silly or irrational, and in this they may actually be wiser than the adults who dismiss their concerns. The child who asks for a nightlight, who wants the door left open, who needs reassurance before sleep, is not weak. They are expressing a normal, healthy, evolutionarily appropriate response to darkness, and providing that reassurance, that small measure of comfort, helps them learn that fear can be managed, that they can feel afraid and still be safe, that the darkness is something that can be faced and endured. This is an important lesson, one that serves them well throughout life, because fear will always be part of the human experience. We will always face uncertainties, always encounter situations that trigger that ancient alarm system. Learning to acknowledge fear without being paralyzed by it, to respect it without being controlled by it, this is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. And it starts, often, in childhood, with learning to navigate the darkness of a bedroom at night. The technological solutions we have developed for dealing with darkness are remarkable and continue to evolve. Night vision devices, thermal imaging, radar, all of these allow us to see in conditions that would have left our ancestors helpless. We can navigate in complete darkness, can detect objects and people that emit no visible light, can effectively turn night into day through technology. This has obvious military applications, and much of the development of these technologies was driven by the desire to gain tactical advantage in nighttime operations. But the civilian applications are significant too. Search and rescue operations at night, wildlife observation without disturbing animals, navigation and safety in remote areas. These technologies extend our capabilities far beyond what evolution gave us, allow us to operate effectively in environments where we would otherwise be blind and vulnerable. And yet, for all these technological marvels, we have not eliminated the psychological response to darkness. A person wearing night vision goggles, able to see clearly in what appears to others as complete blackness, still feels the unease of being in a dark place. The technology changes what they can see, but it does not change what they feel. The fear is not purely rational, not simply about the inability to see. It is deeper, more primal, more resistant to technological solutions. This suggests that our relationship with darkness is not something that can be solved through technology alone. We can make the darkness visible, can eliminate it entirely from our environments, can build lives that never require us to experience true dark. But we cannot change what we are, cannot reprogram the ancient systems that make us wary when the light fades. And perhaps this is as it should be. Perhaps that wariness, that respect for darkness, is worth preserving even in a world where the practical need for it has largely disappeared. The question of how to live well with both light and darkness, how to honour our evolutionary heritage while embracing modern capabilities, is one that each person must answer for themselves. But there are some general principles that seem to emerge from the research and from the experiences of those who have thought deeply about these issues. First, recognise that the fear of darkness is normal and natural. It is not a sign of weakness or irrationality. It is a sign that you are human, that you carry within you the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of evolution. Second, Create environments that work with your biology rather than against it. This means bright light during the day, dimmer light in the evening, and true darkness at night when possible. It means being thoughtful about screen use before bed, about the colour temperature of the lights in your home, about creating sleeping spaces that are dark and quiet and comfortable. Third, give yourself opportunities to experience natural darkness in safe contexts. Visit dark sky preserves. Go camping. Spend time in nature after sunset. Let yourself feel what real darkness is like, what the night sky looks like without light pollution, what it is to be in a place where you cannot see far. These experiences can be profound, can reconnect you to something essential about the human experience. And fourth, teach children about darkness with honesty and respect. Do not dismiss their fears, but do not amplify them either. Provide comfort and reassurance. Give them small measures of control, like being able to turn on a light themselves if they need to. Help them learn that they can feel afraid and still be safe, that the darkness is something that can be navigated and endured. These principles are simple, but they represent a different approach than the one our culture often takes, which is to try to eliminate darkness entirely, to light everything, to pretend that night is just another version of day. That approach works on a surface level, but it creates problems beneath, disrupts systems that need darkness to function properly, disconnects us from natural rhythms that have shaped our species. A more balanced approach recognizes that both light and darkness have their place, that both are necessary, that health and well-being come from honoring both rather than trying to eliminate one. As we come now to the very end of this long journey through the night, through fear and survival and transformation, one final truth remains. You're here because your ancestors were afraid of the dark. That fear kept them alive. It made them cautious, made them clever, made them cooperative. It drove them to discover fire, to invent weapons, to create language and art and culture. It shaped them, and in shaping them, it shaped you. Every time you feel uneasy in the dark, you are feeling what they felt. Every time you reach for a light switch, you are doing what they did when they fed the fire. Every time you check a lock before bed, you are performing the same security rituals they performed. The fear is not new, it is ancient. It is one of the oldest parts of what makes you human. And because they were afraid, because they listened to that fear and let it guide them, you are here, safe, warm, protected in ways they could never imagine. The night is no longer your enemy, but it is also no longer a stranger. You know it now, know where it came from, know what it meant to your ancestors, know how they survived it and eventually conquered it. You understand that the darkness around you is the same darkness that wrapped around the first humans, but you're not the same creature that huddled in terror waiting for dawn. You're something new, something that learned to face the night and survive. And in that survival is a kind of victory, a triumph that took millions of years to achieve. So rest now in the knowledge of where you came from and how far you have travelled. Rest in the safety that was earned through countless nights of vigilance and fear. Rest knowing that you carry within you the strength of all those who came before, and that strength is enough. The night may be dark, but you are light. You are fire. You are the dawn that came after the longest night. And that is something worth celebrating, worth honouring, worth carrying forward into whatever nights lie ahead. Sleep well. The darkness is yours now, no longer something to be feared, but something to be embraced as the necessary other half of existence. The night is where you rest, where you dream, where you restore yourself for the day to come. It is your ally, your refuge, your time. And because your ancestors faced worse and survived, you can face this gentle darkness with peace. Thank you for this journey. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering those who came before, and for honouring them by resting safely in the night they worked so hard to tame. Good night, and sleep deeply.